Welcome to the Fishbowl with Jade, where we put on our scuba gear and take a deeper dive beneath the surface. And today, we're sitting in something that happens every day, quietly, casually, and sometimes without a second thought. But when you really look at it, it carries weight, it carries impact, and for some people, it carries damage. Because the question is simple, but the answer isn't. Why are we so quick to tell someone else's story? Why do we feel comfortable repeating, posting, sharing, and narrating moments that did not originate with us? Moments we experienced secondhand, moments we witnessed, moments we were present for, but not moments that belonged to us. And somewhere along the way, we blurred that line between being present and being entitled, because presence feels like access, and access can feel like ownership. But those are not the same thing. And we don't always stop long enough to separate the two. Because if we're honest, some of us don't just witness life, we collect it. We absorb conversations, experiences, situations, and then we carry them. Not always to protect them, but sometimes to use them, to connect, to relate, to contribute, to feel included, and in some cases, to feel important. Because psychologically, there is something happening underneath that behavior. Telling a story, especially one that has emotion, drama, or significance, gives a person a sense of relevance. It places them in the center of information. It allows them to feel like they have something valuable to offer in a conversation. And in a world where attention has become a form of currency, being the one who knows, being the one who says it first, being the one who brings the story can feel like power, even if that power is temporary. And this is where we have to be honest without being harsh, because not everyone who shares someone else's story is doing it with malicious intent. Some people genuinely don't think they're doing anything wrong. They believe they're helping, updating family, celebrating a moment, or just engaging in what they've always known as normal conversation. I didn't think it was a big deal. I was just telling. Everybody already knows. And from their perspective, it may feel harmless, but intent and impact are not the same thing. And that's where the disconnect happens, because you can mean no harm and still cause harm. You can feel justified and still cross a boundary. And that doesn't make someone a bad person, but it does require awareness, because maturity isn't just about what you intend. It's about what your actions create for someone else. And culturally, this conversation gets even more layered, because not every environment defines privacy the same way. In some families, everything is shared, everything is discussed, everything becomes collective knowledge. There is no separation between my story and our story. And in those spaces, sharing information is seen as connection, not violation. While in other environments, privacy is protection. Boundaries are clear, and personal experiences are treated with care and ownership. And then you add generational differences, where one generation may say, "We've always talked about everything," and another says, "That's not yours to share." And now you have conflict, not just in behavior, but in belief systems. So, what one person sees as normal, another sees as a breach, and neither one fully understands the other without a deeper conversation. And then we have social media, which has completely changed the speed, the scale, and the motivation behind sharing. Because now, moments don't just exist. They are documented, announced, posted, reacted to, and measured. And there is a silent pressure to be first, to be visible, to be part of the narrative. Because if it's not posted, did it happen? If you didn't say it, were you really there? And now storytelling has shifted from something intimate to something performative, where likes, comments, and engagement can reinforce behavior. So now it's not just "I shared this," it's "I was acknowledged for sharing this." And that validation can make it harder for people to pause, harder for people to question, harder for people to hold something that was never theirs to release. But here's where the clarity has to come in. Just because you were present does not mean you were given permission. Presence is not ownership. Proximity is not authority. And witnessing something does not transfer the rights to tell it, because the experience belongs to the person who lived it, the one who felt it, the one who is directly impacted by it, not the one who observed it. And when we ignore that, we don't just share information. We take control of a narrative that was never ours to carry. And sometimes we reshape it unintentionally through our own perspective, our own emotions, our own interpretation. And now the story being told isn't even the original story anymore. And this is the part that often gets overlooked, the person whose story was told, because we don't talk enough about what that feels like to have your moment, your experience, your truth placed into the hands of someone else's voice without your consent. It can feel like exposure, like vulnerability being taken out of your control, like something personal being turned into public conversation. And depending on the situation, it can feel like betrayal, especially if that moment was shared in trust. Because trust isn't just about what you do to someone, it's about what you do with what they give you. And when that trust is mishandled, it doesn't just affect the situation, it affects the relationship. So, how does someone handle that? When their story has already been told, when the moment has already been shared, when the control has already been lost, the first step is recognizing that it wasn't just conversation, it was a boundary crossed. And not every boundary needs a long explanation. Some boundaries need to be enforced through action, through distance, through redefining access, because everyone who is present in your life is not automatically safe with your experiences. And that realization can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary because protecting your peace sometimes means limiting who gets proximity to your personal moments. And for the person who shares, this is where self awareness becomes critical because instead of immediately defending the action, there has to be a pause, a real pause to ask, why did I feel the need to share that? Was it necessary? Was it helpful? Was it mine? Or was it about me needing to feel included, relevant, or acknowledged? Because when you start asking those questions honestly, you begin to see patterns. You begin to recognize moments where silence would have been more respectful, more powerful, and more appropriate. And that awareness doesn't come from judgment, it comes from growth. So maybe the shift isn't complicated, but it does require intention before you repeat something, before you post something, before you tell someone else's story. Ask yourself, is this mine to tell? Was I given permission? Is this necessary? And what does this do for the person whose story it actually is? Because not everything you know is meant to be shared. Not everything you witness is meant to be repeated. And not every moment you are present for belongs to you. And maybe, just maybe, we need to normalize something that feels unfamiliar in a world that rewards noise. We need to normalize discretion. We need to normalize restraint. We need to normalize holding space for other people's experiences without turning them into conversation, because there is strength in silence, there is respect in restraint, and there is maturity in knowing that just because you were there doesn't mean the story was ever yours. Thank you for sitting in the bowl with me. Now let's come back to the surface. Stay classy, stay curious, stay ever evolving. The Fishbowl with Jade can be found on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. Search The Fishbowl with Jade.